Okay, so we are starting a new unit here. Make sure today we have this new unit page. You can print it or you can write it out. The choice is yours. I don't know how many of us, when I ask you to turn it in and say, hey, it's due, go, oh, I didn't know about it, okay? It is in the folder for today. Make sure that you get it added. Like I said, you can print it or you can write it out on that page. I've seen some of you guys be super creative with how you write it out. The next thing within that unit is going to be our passport. Y'all, this is the #1 way to study for your exam. We don't study at the last minute. We make sure that as we learn new information, we can fill it in. But today we are going to add to our notebook, and we're going to add to our notebook with the first thing of information in our government unit, and that is the first government in our country. It's not the Constitution. It's going to be the Articles of Confederation. And now if you're like me, I have a blank page here. I'm going to actually skip this page because I want 2 pages because I'm going to go across both for what we're going to do next. And you guys just did an activity, so you kind of know that we need 2 sides based upon the activity that we did. So here we go. We are going to label it. And I'm going to label going all the way across, nice and big. I'm going to label it Articles of that's an N right there, Federation. The Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation are going to be our first government. It's our first government and our first constitution. Notice this is the little c, not the big C that we're going to talk about in just a few days. So the Articles of Confederation is going to be our title for this page. It is the first government or the first constitution. And you guys just did an activity in which you were able to read about the articles and what they have to offer. And so we are going to start on one side and we're going to write strengths. These are what are good about the articles, how the articles are good for our country. And so we're going to put a smiley face. We like the strengths. But with the good comes the bad. And so on the other side, we're going to write weaknesses. And so we're going to put a little crying face because they are sad. And it is these weaknesses that cause it to fail and not work. All right, so I have strengths and I have weaknesses. Now to help us remember the strengths and weaknesses, we have acronyms for both. And so my strengths, my acronym is the word UPHOLDS. And so I'm going to write my letters big. I might take like 2 lines for each of my letters. So U, P, H, O, L, D, S, upholds. That helps me remember the strengths. And so you guys were asked to figure out what those strengths were. Hopefully you did. The first one is going to be a union. It gets the United States to work together. And so you were asked to give a short little summary. So 13 states together, we're going to help each other out. The P is going to be post office. You might not think it's a big deal, but for communication, it is huge. It is used, ooh, I spelled that wrong. Let me just start over. That's okay. Communication, C-O-M, communication. Across the colonies, it's a big deal to know what's going on in the different colonies, especially during the Revolution. And we all know who our first Postmaster General was. It was none other than Ben Franklin. The H is that they can have treaties. They can make these treaties with other countries. And so these are agreements with other countries. That states can't do it. It can only be done by the federal government. The O is going to be ordinances. And specifically, we are looking at the Northwest Territory. And we're talking about the way to become states. And we'll look further in depth later in the week on that. How do territories become states? Because we only start off with 13, and today we have 50. So how did that happen? The L is none other than laws. Now it's important to note with our laws that you had to get 9 out of the 13 states to agree. That's going to be a little hard to do. 9 out of 13, that's a big old number to agree on making laws. And that's why it was kind of hard for them to make laws. The D is to declare war. They want to make sure that no individual state tries to go to war by themselves. So only the federal government can do that to make sure that no individual state goes to war on its own. And then the S is going to be to sell land. And this is how they are going to make money to pay debts. All right, so it looks like we have some pretty good strengths, and our Articles of Confederation should have done well. But man, those weaknesses are way too hard to overcome. And so for our weakness, our acronym to help us remember it is PACTS. There we go. PACTS. The P is going to stand for, we got to make sure we do it, no president. Now, the Articles of Confederation was all about having a legislative branch, the representatives of the people, making sure they have a voice. But with no president, there is no one to enforce the laws. And we're going to see how that hurts them later. There's nobody to enforce the laws, make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to. The A is no army. If you remember in the Declaration of Independence, no standing army. They were upset with the king for that, and so they didn't want a federal army. But that really means no protection, that they're going to have to rely on each individual state. Well, people from Georgia are not going to want to go up to New York to help protect them. And you might go, well, why would they go to New York? Well, all those British soldiers that were in the colonies during the Revolution, a lot of them didn't leave. They stayed. Kick me out. What are you going to do? Well, we needed a way to get them out, and with no army, there's really no way to defend ourselves. The C is going to be no courts, and we're talking about federal courts. The states have courts, but there are no federal courts. So there's no way to settle disputes across states. So whether it's states arguing over boundaries, people in different states arguing, the state of Pennsylvania trying to sue a person in New Jersey, they're not going to be able to settle them because there's no federal courts. The T is no taxation. Woohoo! No taxes! Sounds great, right? Except our taxes can be a good thing. Taxes help us build stuff. We build roads, we build schools, we build hospitals. And having no taxes means you can't pay off the debt, which some of these debts were to individual Americans, some of them were to countries, or you can't build new stuff. They wanted to build roads, new infrastructure. Infrastructure's building up your country, like your roads, building post offices, building hospitals. They won't be able to do that. Now, what do all of these equal? They're all going to equal the fact that our states are going to argue. And when I say argue, I mean they are going to fight. And the question becomes, can they work together? Because everybody is out for themselves. Everybody wants to make sure that they get a piece of the pie. And when they're fighting and they're arguing, we're not sure if they can work together. And no president to enforce the law, no army to offer that protection, no courts to settle those disputes, those things they're arguing over, no taxation to pay off those debts are going to cause some huge problems. And our first government and our country almost collapses.